Great. Thank you everyone for joining on the August, it is August, right, meeting. And we have a special guest this month, which is Twila Soles from Grouse Malt House. Thank you so much, Twila, for joining. Fantastic. Before we get into Twila's segment, there was a few club things I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention. The very first one, we actually also have Stu on, and it's that we have a new wiki for the club, which is fantastic. And the new wiki is awesome. And Stu, I don't know if you want to take a moment, because I didn't do shit. It was all Stu's work, right? So I did a few things, but
you were a supporter.
Mainly it was Stu's doing, and it's going to be an evolution. So Stu, I don't know if you want to just take a moment to talk about the wiki and point out anything special about it.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Kel. Yeah, it's just an idea we've been kicking around for the last couple of years, I guess, with Joe. Originally, we were talking about it with Joe, and then yeah, we finally hit the go button in July. At the end of July, we launched a little wiki, and it is definitely a work in progress. There's a lot of pages with just some quick notes or ideas, sort of just pieces there that could be filled in, but hopefully it's sort of a resource for people who are either just getting started in gluten-free brewing and are asking great but basic questions that are sometimes hard to find on the Facebook group. But the other side of it is we're hoping that we can actually fill in some more detailed technical stuff, partly through these kind of webinars or these meetups with different people. Like, it's great to have access to maltsters here on a monthly or occasional basis. So that's the intent. So right now it's a pretty small little editorial group of people, but if you've got ideas or edits or fixes or anything you want to suggest, there's a few different ways you can make those. So let us know.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, and it's when you look through, I mean, when I was looking through it, I was like, wow, this is, when you start editing the pages, that's when you realize, oh, this is a lot of work, right? Because there's a lot of information in there. So I'll just put it at that. It's fantastic that it exists. I think it's a great resource for the club and for anyone that's just brewing gluten-free beer. So the next one was liquid yeast, right? So liquid yeast, and Brian from Gluten-Free Homebrewing. It looks like you're on. Hopefully your audio works. Hey, Brian, can you hear us?
Hello. So yeah, liquid yeast. We're getting ready to put together an order. We have to order them in 50 pouches. They're switching to pouches from vials last year, which should make shipping and leakage less of an issue. Our goal, like best case scenario, is to do like in October, November, I forget what the months were. October, November, January, December and January, and February and March or something like that. I don't remember what the dates are, but we're hoping to do 3 successions of liquid yeast offerings. The lineup has changed a little bit from last year. I just created, or Kale and I have been working on a survey. I just created a bit link for that, so you don't have a huge, long Google Docs link for the survey. I'd like to have Zero Tolerance respond to the survey initially, like first, to get a pulse of what the club is interested in, and then I'll send it up to my customers and get an idea of what the rest of my customer base is interested in. So I can post that now while we're doing the meeting on the Zero Tolerance Facebook page and kind of get an idea of that. Hey, Twila.
Hi, Brian. Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yes.
Hey, Brian, thanks a lot for doing that with Propagate. That's an awesome change from what we've had in the last, even just in the last year. So that's been great. So thanks very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Brian. And I think people realize that there's how much work goes into figuring all this stuff out, and it's not like you're selling hundreds, like not like it's a big money making proposition, right, Brian? It's like kind of almost like you're doing it out of the kindness of your own heart, right? So
Yeah, you got a crash course into the process of what goes into it. You know, we're a nano niche of a part of the industry, and we're not selling thousands of vials. We're selling very small amounts. So I think everything with this this type of hobby and business and industry, that a lot of it has to be out of, you know, your desire and passion. Otherwise, I mean, the market is growing. I can attest to that. But yeah, initially it needs to be a lot of personal interest and what's better for the overall gluten-free culture and community.
and I'm sure that I mean, if I look at the list, there's a ton of them, of those yeasts that I want to actually purchase. But if you think about that, you probably should be using those within a 30-day time frame. That creates a situation where unless you're just brewing a crazy amount, like you have to plan things out, right? So
yeah, we learned a lot of lessons from last year. Last year was kind of our trial run. We probably could have done a second run last year and learned and adapted to the mistakes we made initially. But I think you and I have talked about this extensively, and I think we have a good plan. So hopefully it pays off for everybody.
Fantastic. So we'll be looking forward to that being posted to the Facebook page. So please, everyone out there in gluten-free brewing land, please fill that out. If you're going to be buying liquid yeast, that'd be fantastic. Since the last meeting, there's been a couple of new videos posted to the YouTube page. There was the meeting with Alan Winhausen from Holidaily, which was a great interview. And then I did a video on building your own custom false bottom. So check that out if you're interested. I was going to talk about the BJCP guidelines, and I'm just not going to do it, right? So I'm not even going to mention it. So I'm going to skip over that one. Brian Newcomb, who's in his car driving, just had his Great Head Throwdown competition, and so if you submitted beers to that, then I'm sure he thanks you. He's driving right now, so and then I think he's going to be doing tastings of those beers over the next week or so?
Yeah, I'm gonna get to I had a crazy work weekend. I had decided to break. My Jeep is 4 hours away from home in Middletown, Ohio, being hopefully fixed at the dealership. And I have to go pick it up sometime this week, whenever they decide to tell me it's done. And in between there and working every other midnight, I'm gonna start working on evaluating those beers, and I'll post things as I make progress on that. I think everyone that sent in their submissions, and it's gonna be a fun thing once everything comes through to the end, and I'm sure whoever wins is going to be really excited with their prize pack that they're going to get. It's going to be cool.
Awesome. Well, we'll be looking forward to you posting those results. Hopefully you can post those on the group page.
Yeah.
The last thing before we get to Twila is that there's the Holidaily competition, which is coming up, and that is needs to have beers to Holidaily by the 21st of September. So keep that on your calendars as well. So that's it for that. So now we have Twila. Thank you so much for joining, Twila. I think everyone should know Grouse Malt House, right? But if they don't, or they're out in YouTube land, maybe you could just give us an overall view of how you got started, what you do, all the nuts and bolts. That'd be great.
All right. Well, go ahead and get started. So yeah, happy to be here with you all today and share a little bit about Grouse's story and some of our products and things that we've learned along the way. So I moved to Colorado back in 2008 from Ohio, and I came out here for graduate school to Colorado State University. to study food science and food safety. And it was during one of my first semesters that I took a elective class because it sounded like fun. My eyes had just been open moving to Fort Collins to the multitude of craft breweries and was very much enjoying craft beer. So the elective course that I signed up for was Brewing Science and Technology. And it was in that class that after touring brewery after brewery, I noticed that a classmate wasn't drinking any of the beer. And so finally I asked her, do you not like beer or what's up? And she said that she had celiac disease and that she just found out that she had celiac disease and that she really loved beer, but she really wanted to feel good. So she couldn't drink any of these beers that were offered. And my undergrad is in nutrition, so I knew about celiac disease and what that entailed. And so I said, well, there's got to be gluten-free beer on the market. And she said, yes, there were, but they all tasted like crap. So I needed to try it for myself. So that night I went out to the liquor store and I got myself some Redbridge. And I was so mad that that was her option. It didn't even taste like beer, anything close. So I made it my personal mission to make her a great tasting gluten-free beer. And that led me down the path of cold calling farmers. And luckily, Colorado is, and where I'm at in Colorado is a big, there's a lot of farmers out here that grow millet. And so one of the first farmers that I called was an organic millet farmer. And she invited me out to her farm and we chatted and she gave me some samples of millet. And so I started to malt those in my kitchen. And I had a friend who had a homebrew system and we brewed on his system, just pale millet malts. And what we were making on his homebrew system was really good. It was much, much better than anything that was available on the market. At that time, we were definitely using decoction method. I had gotten my hands on Andrew Lavery's malting and brewing. Maybe some of you are familiar with his documents. And so I started to, use what he had shared and then build upon that. And over the course of several years, making a lot of mistakes, malting, burning, or I started roasting in the oven and on the, just doing some pretty crazy things. And ultimately I was able to make some contacts with some craft maltsters across the country and visited their malt houses and was mentored by several of them with what to do, what not to do if you're interested in starting a malt house. And so I knew what I was working on had was valuable. It was needed. It was definitely a small niche of people that I started to talk to on a homebrew forum. I met Ryan Bove from Aurochs and IG, Jason Yerger. Were two of the first people that I met, and we were talking, and I was talking about malting, and they were like, you should do this for us. And I was thinking about it, but was missing a few pieces of the puzzle. And then I met my late husband, William Soles, and he, from the moment I met him, and one of our first conversations was about my little project and how I really wanted to malt gluten-free grains. And he was on board big time and was a huge, a lot of the muscle behind Grouse getting started and getting our initial equipment put together. And let's see, where else? So I did malt on, there was a small malt outfit out of Reno, Nevada called Rebel Malting. And that's where we did our first batch of 600 pounds of pale millet malt there, and then did turn some of that into crystal and roasted it. And then I have a cousin who has a small brewery in Ohio, Rock Mill, and we brewed a small batch, but our first commercial batch of gluten-free beer, and he was really impressed with it and was like, you need to do something with this. So ultimately we did start Grouse, and was founded in 2013 in Wellington, Colorado. And I'm still friends with that millet farmer that I called up initially. We do source a little bit of our millet, some of our organic millet from her. And let's see, what else to tell you about Grouse's origination story. So another big piece of it, and it wasn't until actually 2013 when we were already well on our way. We had already bought our first few pieces of equipment, our roaster and our unisystem. And I was like, you know, I really should try out eating a gluten-free diet. I wonder if it would help me in any way. Well, it turns out I had been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, an autoimmune disease, about a decade prior. And it turns out that eating gluten-free helped me control my this autoimmune disease that I had really been struggling with, flares, if you know anything about ulcerative colitis, for a long time. And so it just felt like providence, because I very much loved craft beer, and here we were set up to help make malts to provide that important ingredient to gluten-free breweries. So yes. Okay, so about Grouse, when we got started, and even still today, there's really wasn't a whole lot of malting equipment, especially at the scale that we know we needed to start at. Again, back then there wasn't a huge demand, so we were like, well, we'll put together a unisystem so that we can steep and malt, or steep and germinate and kiln all in the same vessel. So that's what we did, and I do have a picture that I can share real quick of our malt house. And you'd think I've been on enough Zoom calls, I'd be able to, here we go, do this. Can you all see my screen okay? Oh, here, let me do this. So this is our malt house. It's this elevator, grain elevator, was a working elevator until sometime in the 90s, and it was built in 1922. It was sitting vacant for several years before we got into it, so quite a bit of elbow grease to get this building cleaned up. And originally we did rent out spaces of it to other companies, but happy to say starting in 2020, Grouse operates out of the whole facility. There's no other businesses here. So this is our malt house, and this is our very adorable initial system that was a 1,000-gallon dairy mix tank that will retrofitted to be our unitank. And so while it did all of the systems, it did none of them very well, and definitely with no automation. So to explain the malting process, it's a multi-day process. And so if the water needed to be added or drained, or the grain needed to be aerated, I was here doing that by hand around the clock. And so we lived very close to the malt house, and it was absolutely a labor of love. So we did that for a year, and then in 2014 we expanded the malting process to a steep tank and then a germination room, which we built, and we initially floor malted. And we did that for several years, 2 years, and then because germination was our bottleneck, we ultimately built Saladin style boxes in this temperature and humidity controlled room, so that we were able to have 2 batches going in germination at once. And then we used that old vessel as our kiln. So that was kind of the progression. And now in 2017 we brought on this. Any guesses what this is? It's a drum. It's a GKV, so we're actually able to germinate and kiln in here. And another great thing is, so when we initially started in that unisystem, at best we could malt 2,000 pounds, and even that, when the grain was germinating, some of it had to be removed so that there was room to stir it, and it was 3 feet deep and very, very labor intensive. So now to have a fully automated system that is 3 tons, is really quite a dream come true, not to mention how we're able to push our limits. So some of the products that we've come out with more recently, and we'll talk about those in a little bit, we're really only able to do that because of our new equipment and what we're able to achieve in our kilning process with temperatures. So these GKVs, we currently have 2 of them. They each have their own germination system, and they all share a kiln, and they do rotate. So there's no need to put on boots and grab the shovel any longer. We just have it in the recipe that it rotates on its own, which is wonderful. Oh, we'll get into that. Yeah.
So Twila, no Saladin boxes. Did you have Saladin for a little while, or did you move straight to the GKBs?
Saladin style. So we still we controlled the temperature by blowing air up through the grain bed, but they didn't have any sort of stirring mechanism.
Right.
We still got in the beds and stirred. Mm-hmm.
Very physical, imagine.
Sure, Twila, so I know as brewers, we run into the size of millet causing us kind of a lot of issues and related to standard brewing equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to equipment that you use for malting, do you run into the same situation with the size of the grains in the equipment?
Well, we've had to build all of our equipment from scratch. So originally, we sized the screen, got from McMaster or from McNichols appropriately so that it would handle millet, not quinoa. So when we have malted quinoa, we've had to put down another layer of stainless steel mesh, but it was appropriately sized for millet. And then the company that we worked with to build the germination, the GKVs, and our new steep tank, it was appropriately sized for millet. So that's I know that's an issue with brewing. That's absolutely. And we've just from the get-go have worked around the size of millet by engineering the equipment to handle it from the get-go. Yeah. Just speaking to differences between malting barley, I don't have a whole lot of experience malting barley, but one of the things that on the engineering side, the engineers have really been surprised about is how much different millet is. It's much more similar to, say, a rye or a wheat, and how dense it can be, right? Because those seeds do pack on each other so tightly, we have to overcome quite a bit of the more like static pressure inches of water column when in different processes in steeping and in germination. So
I think you touched on it, but just so that I understand this, it looked like the equipment that you first started with and then what you have now is a really big difference with the amount of production. So how much like when you began, how much grain were you malting, like, I don't know, a month, and what is it now like?
Well, initially, right, we would malt maybe 1 or 2 batches a month, and not even full batches, and our first system could do 2,000 pounds maximum. So it really depended on who was ordering at the time. And think about back in 2013, Ghostfish was around. Oryx got started around then too, but there wasn't a whole lot of demand at that time. So now we have 2 of the germination of our GKVs, and we can finish about 3 batches a month total, 3 batches a week, and those are 3 ton. So we've absolutely grown about every year. We've kind of doubled our size, and expect that again for 2020, going into 2021, even though COVID certainly did affect us. But we anticipate bringing on drum number 3, hopefully by first quarter of 2021. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, how much of that malt production is domestic, like is staying in the U.S. or North America versus? I know you're sending some of it over to down to Australia.
Yeah, we do export a little bit, and the vast majority is still in the United States.
Yeah.
It sure makes paperwork easier.
Yeah.
So, yes. Let's see. Any other questions? I think another question, Kale, that you had wanted me to touch on was, I guess, just some of our products and new products that we've come out with. Our caramels are a relatively new product. They were released last year. And so we really wanted to, initially we have offered a true crystal malt. And that is something that really required a whole lot of labor in order to, from green malt, to be able to get a full conversion. And so we had another piece of equipment that we were able to make about 100 pounds at a time of crystal malt. So with our new germination kiln drums, we were able to release and produce a product, the caramel. So it has quite a lot of that residual sugar still, it developed in it, but it didn't require us to unload the green malt from a vessel and to stew it. So we're really able to get that stewing action in the drum. And then we just tried roasting that, because that's, we offer the roasted cara, and so we make a cara and then we roast small batches of that to make the roasted cara. So the caramel is very similar. And one of the things we were so surprised about is the flavor of, for example, the darkest caramel that we offer, which is our caramel 240 Lava Bond. So it's about a 300 to 350 SRM. And that compared to our dark roasted millet malt, the flavor was incredibly smooth, didn't have nearly as much of that ashy, kind of charcoaly-ness that you get, but really robust, dark chocolate flavors. And so we're really excited about our whole line of caramel. So we offer 3 different roasts and then and the caramel proper. So another product that we have been able to introduce are some Hydride malts. So our Goldfinch is an example of that, as well as the Red Wing. And so the Red Wing is our darkest non-roasted product so far, and that one is around a 35 SRM, so, and a great ruby color. We have a lot of customers that are using that in red ales, and we weren't able to make those type of products with our old system, our old kiln, because we really need high intensity heat, and our new kilning system can offer that, as well as being able to rotate some while we're kilning or stewing.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this before, but one of our meetings, one of the members who we haven't seen for a while, but Ed Golden had created this method because he wasn't really happy with the crystal malts that were available. And so what he was doing was steeping pale millet malt in turmamil into an enzyme, and then putting it in an oven for a couple hours. And then,
yeah, I watched this video, and
what's your opinion on that?
I mean, I did that. That's how, well, without the enzymes. I will say we never added enzymes, but originally before having malting equipment proper, I would make pale malt in my kitchen and then would roll it in logs and bake it. After it was dry, so I would soak it and bake it. Hopefully remember to pull it out and to check it and really to get that full conversion and then dry it out again. So that process works really, really well. So props to him for making up that process. It is really challenging to do that on a larger scale. So it's definitely been a battle to develop something on an R&D scale and then say, okay, how are we gonna make tons of this at a time? But we're figuring it out.
That's a good point on the R&D piece for such a small production relative to what most, even some of the craft maltsters or barley craft maltsters are probably there's quite a, it's just an economy of scale. So how do you decide what new malts you're going to come out with? What's the driver for that, or even for your, I guess, your catalog of what you've got now? How did you decide to make the malts you've got going now?
I mean, it's been a handful of things. Originally, when we were like, well, we should make something new, but what should that be? I remember we were making a batch of pale millet malts, and we lost power. We lost power for 15 hours at the malt house, and we had a batch that was at the end of germ. And so as soon as we got power again, we fired it back up, and definitely didn't taste like pale millet malt. And that was the beginning, actually, of our Vienna millet malt. So some of it a little bit of it has just been by accident, and
trial and error.
Something happened in process, and whether that's for some reason or another, the kiln temperature went way too hot. It got way too hot, and then we're able to get this color, right, because we got too hot. Maybe not the inherent enzymes now any longer, but now we have this great color. So some of it was by accident, happy accidents, and a lot of it has been intentional. Okay, well, how can we develop this flavor? And customers are asking for this type of roast. Let's try this out. So just happened organically, and we've been thinking hard about what we want to offer next. And some of the things that are on our list is an oat malt, a certified gluten-free oat malt, and also to experiment more. I think we could do a lot more with buckwheat. We really only offer a pale buckwheat malt at this point in time, and some roasted buckwheat malts, but we're excited to experiment more with and take some of what we've done in R&D and do that on our commercial system.
Yeah, I was gonna mention, and I think you just touched on the topic with the Caramel 240 about the millets, especially the darker millets. I think from what people in the club have discovered, especially in darker beers, right, that there tends to have astringent, kind of, I guess you said, charcoaly kind of flavor to that. So it sounds like that 240 caramel is kind of moving away from that happening, but a lot of people go towards the darker rice malts to avoid that happening. So, and I don't know if you have that experience with some of the darker malts that are available commercially, or do you get feedback on that in terms?
Absolutely. And I will say, if you're looking to just add, say, the dark roast to get the color and the flavor there, then especially if you're using just our MI 1300, the dark roasted millet malt, that you get a lot of that. You really need other types of roast to kind of make up that flavor profile, as well as offer some color, but not necessarily the 300 to 350 range. But it helps smooth it out. If you say, even if you're adding some light roast and some medium roast at decently high percentages for roast, that it just really helps kind of round it out. But now with our Caramel 240, definitely that really helps, and I would recommend that really over our MI 1300, our dark roasted millet malt, because it just has a superior flavor.
Nice. Thank you.
Twila, I think most of your millet is Proso millet. Is that right? Is it all Proso?
True.
And do you beyond that, do you have any idea of what different varieties you're actually using, and does that have any impact on the malting process for you?
Absolutely. And I will, the seeds, they can vary in terms of what their optimal malting regime is, depending on season, even if it's the same variety. So we certainly track our varieties, and they have changed over the years slightly, but we really don't vary too much, and it's all 100% white Proso. And so yeah.
Do you, and then I guess just taking that further, do you have much interplay or I don't know, conversation, I guess, with the growers around how they're growing it, the fertilization, and just the impact again to the the protein and carbohydrate percentages and that kind of stuff? Does that come up for you?
Well, we work very closely with our farmers. I would say that the biggest conversation that we have with our farmers is the importance of gluten-free, right?
Yeah.
Millet is inherently a gluten-free product, but it only is truly gluten-free if the farmer is aware of this and and prevents cross-contamination at a multitude of different stages, right? Planting, harvesting and combining and picking up the windrows and storage. So there's a lot of opportunities on the farm for potential contamination. So we have a lot of conversations, and I'm on site often just to confirm that. And then in terms of fertilizing and on-farm practices, that is certainly something that's a part of the conversation, but not all farmers do the same thing in terms of how they're fertilizing, especially not if they're conventional versus organic. But another big thing hasn't been too big of an issue yet with millet in particular, but I'm not sure if anyone has heard of desiccation. And desiccation is a process in grain farming that has been around for actually quite a while, and it does help farmers cut down on the amount of fuel that they're using at harvest time. So basically what it means is they spray Roundup on the crop. It allows it to mature quickly, and then they can come in and straight cut it. So just sharing this information to say that Grouse does not source any millet or buckwheat, any grains that have gone through this desiccation process with a pesticide. So that's not something that is something that we're very much aware of, and that we do not purchase grain that has gone through that process.
Thank you for that. That sounds awesome.
Good.
I think it's worth pointing out too that in a time where how the challenges that consistency pose to any part of the process, because we're used to going to a grocery store and all of our bananas look the same and all of our apples look the same, and you're producing a product fairly consistently within a really tight parameter, and there isn't a whole lot of deviation between one batch to the next, which is, from a home brewer perspective, I think sometimes overlooked, because we don't typically brew the same beer over and over again. We learn from our mistakes, we roll with our mistakes, but to do the same process again and again, batch after batch, is an incredible feat.
Well, we make several promises to our customers, and that is that all of our products are gluten-free. We ship on time. Can't do anything about the trucking, sorry about that, but we definitely ship on time, and we make a very consistent product. So all of the malt that we make, we test in-house, and before it's released as a batch of Munich or a batch of Pale, Vienna, Cara, you name it, we taste it, we do a moisture test, we make sure that it hits our specifications for color and flavor before we release it. So we know it's important to you. It's important to us. So
I've got a
go ahead, Brandon.
question. I'm working on doing a hazy IPA.
Mm-hmm.
Which of your malts would you pick that would most or contribute the most to haze?
Well, that's a tough one. I would say, right now the only oat product that we offer are rolled oats. So I think, but depending on, I know that there are a lot of individuals with gluten intolerance that just don't want oats at all.
Yeah, I was avoiding the oats.
Okay. That's a tough one, because if you're doing the process, how we normally, say, okay, we want to do a little bit more recirc than what you would want to with barley malt. So I would just say it needs to be more process related. Don't recirculate enough. Don't add whirl flock. Don't do those things to try to get that haze.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's an interesting question around modification, and you know, in the barley world, you get some less modified malts, and some of that is you know, again, sort of adjunct driven, or what else they're adding to it. But for your products, mostly for the millet, but I guess for buckwheat too, do you have much control, or do you make decisions about how modified you're going to let those grains become? Would you ever do an under modified millet, for example?
I mean, we certainly could, but again, going to process it, if we purposefully under modify it, that's great. If you're adding exogenous enzymes,
yeah,
you know, that it's not really going to carry through. So,
right. Yeah.
So I think I can ask this question and not put you in like the hot seat or anything. What about like an acid style malt? We're noticing that a lot of the enzymes we're working with operate best at a high or low pH. And I've been using lactic acid for that process. Is there anything in the hopper as far as like some kind of acid style malt?
Yeah, that's actually something that I was just talking with a friend who's a maltster and talking about a honey slight acidulated malt. And so that is on a small scale, that's something that is on the radar. I'll get you some samples, Brian.
You
And
know,
that would be
I'll
kind of
sell
cool. It would be cool to have some acidulated malt, but again, I don't know what the demand or how big of a demand there is for that.
Yeah,
to make it worth your while.
You know, at this point, I think it's great to utilize water chemistry to achieve that. But yes, a honey malt is something that's on our list to R&D.
Yeah, so from my perspective, because I can't control the brewing process once it goes out to the customer, so I try and do my due diligence to design things in a manner that there's as little room for error as possible. And it would be far simpler to include a small amount of acid malt than it would be to say, hey, here's this bottle of lactic acid and here's this whole really complicated process. And to somebody in zero tolerance, that might be fun, but a lot of my customers might be deterred from that process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I hear you on that. We'll get to work on it.
I thought we were your only customers right here.
Who else is there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, should we dive into a little bit?
His customers were in the club.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I just, one of the things that we've spent quite a bit of time, especially in the past few years, and will absolutely continue to, is to really provide you with the best practices for brewing to yield the highest extract that is possible and a fermentable wort. So I wanted to just share a little bit of research that we've done, if you're interested, because I think I certainly feel like I've come a long way from doing a decoction.
Does it involve really complicated mashing and enzymes? Then yes, we're totally.
Well, it's definitely right. It's not going to be quite as straightforward as barley brewing. So, but let's talk a little bit about what works and what doesn't. So here, can you all see this slide? Okay, so what this shows, and these were done on a lab scale, so there's a caveat. But so this is a small scale mash bath done by our partners at Hartwick College in Oneonta, New York. And so mash profile A here is a mash that started at 176 degrees Fahrenheit with enzyme, termamyl, high temp alpha, and held for 60 minutes. And then we dropped it to 160 degrees to dose the glucoamylase enzyme, because hopefully we all know that the glucoamylase enzyme is not nearly as heat stable as a high temp alpha. So we got to hit a high temp initially, and then we reduced the mash temperature to 160 degrees to dose that second enzyme, and held for 30 minutes. So interestingly, the blue here is neat, so no enzymes. We've got with enzymes, and then we've got with enzymes, and then water chemistry to reduce the mash pH to 5.2. So what we can see from this initial is that it actually, I mean, it increases some from 72 without any enzymes to 77.2 or 77.3 when we add enzymes. But you can see this over here is the fermentability. So, mash profile B is this is 155 Fahrenheit, so a traditional mash temperature. And both of the enzymes were added at the same time. So we can see that by getting a higher initial mash temp, 176 versus 155, we get a significantly better initial extract. Anybody have any questions about that? Yes. And then this slide takes those two, mash profile A and mash profile B, and compares the fermentability. So that the one that had an initial extract of 72, it was very less fermentable. And that makes sense because we didn't add exogenous enzymes. And so, I'm not sure what I just did. Sorry. Having some issues. Wait 1 second. There we go. So comparing that to when we did use enzymes, it was very, very fermentable. And same thing with the mash profile B. So we know, learning from this experiment, that it's really important that at some point in the mash process that we achieve a higher mash temperature. We know that millet and buckwheat both have a higher gelatinization temperature than malting barley does. So it's really important that you hit a higher mash temp, even if you're adding enzymes, in order to get the best extract. And getting ahead of myself, we tried this same experiment using a combination, because we do recommend using a certain percentage of buckwheat to help with mouthfeel and head retention. And so we did the same experiment with 70% millet malt and 30% malted buckwheat, and very similar results. You know, we can see here with this mash profile A that we got initially without any enzymes, 71, with enzymes, 76. So very, very, very similar here. And then same thing, very, very much not fermentable, but actually a little bit more fermentable when we added buckwheat, and we did a normal 155 mash. So we're like, okay, if this works when we start high and go low, how about going low and starting high? It really depends on your brew system, what would make the most sense for you. So this is a very recent experiment that we did. We looked at an initial going in at 131 degrees Fahrenheit, and we actually included Ondia Pro in this experiment because we've heard a lot of talk on Zero Tolerance Gluten-Free Homebrew Club about Ondia and how it can be really beneficial. So we were like, okay, let's try this out. So for some of these mashes, we did the Ondia and the Termamil and the glucoamylase. For some, we just did a Termamil, no glucoamylase, and just the Ondia Pro. And so here are some findings. When we found that when we had an increased temperature for our final hold, 165 versus 170 versus 175, we got a much more fermentable or a higher extract, right? So the higher mash off temperatures resulted in a higher extract. However, on the other side, it resulted in a lower fermentability. So, this goes to show that brewing, especially with gluten-free grains, it's really a trade-off. What can your system do? And do you want the highest extract possible, but sacrificing some of that fermentability? Maybe you do, depending on what style you're going with. Another insight from this experiment was that Ondia Pro only increases the extract about 1% on average, and that using Ondia Pro and not using a glucoamylase enzyme significantly decreases the fermentability of that wort.
I think that's a really overlooked point, is that depending on the style of beer, like it seems like there's a lot of emphasis on just trying to get the highest efficiency, but depending on the style of beer you're going for, you may not want that. And you might want to choose your brewing process, your mash process, the enzymes you're working with, depending on the style of beer.
Absolutely. And how much enzyme you're using, Any other questions about optimization of mashing? What's worked for you? What hasn't?
I'm trying to make sense of this, and so correct me if I'm wrong. Does this mean that you can basically benefit from a reverse step mash or decoction mash, even if you're completely relying on exogenous enzymes?
I'm not sure if I quite follow you, but you can do either. We've shown here that you can either do a step mash up with enzymes, or go the opposite way, start high and then come down. That's possible to you. The next round of experimentation that we're going to be doing is starting high again and then and coming down, because I do think if you have that ability, that is the best way to get the highest extract and the most fermentable wort, to start high, to get that gelatinization, and then be able to have then lower your temperature so that glucoamylase can really do the work to break down those starches into fermentable sugars.
Right. Thanks. That's what I was thinking.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're doing like a different, like say if you want a little bit of like residual sweetness in your beer, though, maybe you would want to do something like rising, like a decoction or something like that, to still get a little bit of that sweetness in the finished beer.
Yeah, you could do that. You could also, start high and then maybe not go quite so low, so that if you do add glucoamylase enzyme, it doesn't do, it deactivates or denatures pretty quickly, or reduce the amount of glucoamylase that you're pitching, or don't hold that rest nearly as long. So
interesting.
So you mentioned Andrew Lavery earlier, more in terms of the malting, but he's also got an interesting sort of mash routine technique that.
Oh yeah, I've done it.
Okay, with the decanting.
Oh yeah.
So I got questions for you around that. So we know that millet has some endogenous enzymes there. Mm-hmm. We know it has some capacity. I don't know whether you measure DP, or I guess the diastatic power, I guess, is probably a little difficult just for some of these reasons. But it'd be interesting to see, I guess, an experiment where we looked at what the actual, if you were to add back some of those endogenous enzymes at a later stage, after you've gelatinized, you've denatured those enzymes. Be curious to know what the impact would be.
Sure, and it's definitely doable. I mean, I brewed without enzymes for a full year, but ultimately, in order for it to be commercially viable, I really do believe that it's important to utilize exogenous enzymes and to embrace them and use them as a tool. So it's possible. We definitely struggled with that fermentability piece. Even if we would achieve a higher, just like that, the one slide showed, we got over a 70% extract, which, is not awful. However, if it didn't attenuate down, it was half of what we wanted, then
that's a problem too.
We'll have a little bit of a problem. So
yeah. I don't know if you have other slides to share, but I had a couple questions around the future of, gluten-free grains and what you're doing. And specifically, so we touched on this when we talked a couple weeks ago, and it might be a sore subject for some people, but there's this concept of this Kabari ultra low gluten barley. I think frustrates a lot of people with this group, because why wouldn't someone have just made like a millet, a breeding program for millet that created it to have, a bigger grain size or whatever, right? But I think I know the answer to why they did it that way, but do you see that there's going to be different breeds of millet in the future that are bred to be more brewer friendly as opposed to just made for like birdseed or something like that? Do you think that's on the horizon?
Yeah, I think that is something that is being pursued in small facets, and Kansas State University, as well as other universities that we're looking at breeding. And it's unfortunate. Well, it is what it is, right? So this Kabari, and it has been in the works for over a decade, to try to reduce the amount of gluten in barley. And so it takes a lot of time. I think we'll get there with millet. It's just it takes time for breeding trials. So.
Yeah. Do you see like any there's no other millet maltsters in the entire world, right? So do you see like someone else wanting to do that, or do you feel like it's just like a niche market where you'll be the only malter? Because when we talked to Jim Eckert, right, he was like, if someone else, like if Anheuser-Busch, InBev, like funded someone to malt rice, they would just put them out of business, right? So, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. My question is, it's like, do you feel like there's like some giant competitor that's going to come try to squash you or something like that, right?
I mean, sure, I've had that fear. Had a lot of fears when I started Grouse. It was like, well, gluten-reduced beer is going to come in and make our product obsolete, right? So Grouse, from the get-go, we've always worked hard to do what the best job we can do and have control over what we have control over. And that is to produce the highest quality product that we can. I guess if someone wants to come in and make a millet malt and be a competitor, they will. But we're going to do our best here making great malts for you guys to brew with, and we'll see what happens in the future.
Well, if you just go to, like, not to plug our wiki again, but there's a list of commercial dedicated commercial gluten-free breweries that are available anywhere in the world, right? And the majority of them are in North America, and like all of them basically probably wouldn't exist without your millet, right? So, I mean, unless there was a bunch of breweries producing like sorghum beers, which I highly doubt. So I feel like the industry is just blowing up over the last five years, and it seems like for all this equipment that you've shown us, I mean, that's the reason why all these breweries exist.
Well, we've grown along with our customers. We've grown to keep up with the demand, and we very much continue to grow and have plans to do so. So.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I do. Twila, have you ever messed around with German or Japanese millet?
Hey, Bob. I haven't, primarily because our sources, we work with farmers within 200 miles of the malt house. It's really important to us to utilize local crops and to work with local farmers. And the varieties of millet that we use are very well adapted to our climate. And so while we've had conversations about trying out different varieties, that might be something that we'll do with certain farmers on very small trial plots. But a lot of times farmers are hesitant to try out new varieties if they're not tried and true in our climate. And also from my understanding, Prozo Proso millet malt, especially the varieties that we use. And it was just kind of coincidence that it happened this way, but we're using the largest existing varieties of millets out there. So you look at a fingerling, you look at some of the other varieties, what historically they were using in Africa, making beer with, much smaller than what we're using here. So
Okay.
yeah. All right. Well,
How about it's just, sorry, one last question on that one. Then sorghum malt. We know we get access, and you mentioned it at the beginning of, we hear about sorghum syrup basically, which doesn't really go through a malting process. So ever considered doing sorghum grain as a malt?
Yeah, and that's certainly something that we have tried. There's a reason that we don't offer it, I think. Yeah, I know that it's very variety specific. I know that there are individuals malting sorghum successfully. Sorghum, Milo, has a lot of issues in germinating. And Brian, I did gluten-free beer, Brian. I mentioned that to you in a post that you had shared with us, and just to be mindful, right? If you're sprouting something, and especially if it's not optimal for the growth of the seed, and it can be optimal for other things like mold, and that is very much an issue with sorghum. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was, if you go back to.
So how would I best identify that?
Well, discoloration on the seed is very, very common.
Okay.
That's what mold does. And just if you're trying it, either a hot steep, I highly recommend utilizing the hot steep method versus just popping it in your mouth. You can certainly do that too. In my experience with sorghum malt, it's really got this bitter, almost the metallic-y flavor. I get it, that sorghum syrup has. But if you get a bitterness from your malt, that's usually not a very good sign, and that's indicative of mold and other issues. So,
if I may, I was gonna ask, you already touched on R&D, so if you can tell us a few words about how you do brewing yourself, like. I assume you have a pilot system in your malt plant, or?
We do utilize a homebrew system. This fall, we're actually installing our an R&D, a 1-barrel system here at Grouse, so that we'll be able to control our fermentation temperatures and really knock out some of the variables, and expand on what we've learned on a lab scale, and use a pilot scale system.
Yes, and you have a large company of friends to consume all the beer.
Yeah.
Where does that go? I mean, 1 barrel is quite much.
Well, we don't have it yet, but our team is looking forward to that, and I guess the benefit of a 1 barrel is that we'll be able to do smaller batches, right? We'll be able to do hopefully a 10, if not a 15 gallon batch, and have smaller fermenters. So.
Okay, sounds good.
Not starting a brewery.
Yeah, you're not going to drink all that beer.
Really want to do our best work with, we get a lot of feedback from customers. Hey, we did this, and the issue is the malt, right? The malt gets blamed for a lot of brewing issues. So it's really advantageous to be able to recreate something and say, okay, this is how this grist bill performed on our system when we were controlling A, B, C, and D. So.
Excellent.
Well, we really appreciate the malt that you're providing to us. It's amazing to get into this world and have such great quality ingredients available to us, especially here in North America. Not everyone is as lucky, I guess. But anyway, so really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been truly my pleasure. I've really enjoyed this road and all that I've learned on the way, and the people that I've met. So it's been mutually beneficial.
Yeah, great. I had one more question, Twila, if you've got a second.
I got to go check my germinating grain, but yes, Bob, what's up?
For sure. With darker grains, would you still mash those in high on your high to low, or would you wait till you get within a certain temperature range before adding them?
That's a good question. See, this would be a really good variable to try out on our new system. I mean, I really don't think it would matter too much, because I definitely have had beers, a stout that has gone, 176 and then down. So I don't think that there's any issue with, extracting any more tannins or having any non-desirable flavors coming off of that dark malt at a higher temperature. So I don't think it matters much. And we know that, so I would leave it at that.
Yeah, mash pH. I think as long as you have the right mash pH, you're probably just fine.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And it does seem like a mash pH, even though, I have people reach out and they're like, oh, this enzyme is, has this really wide range of optimization. It doesn't matter what the mash temp is. It really does seem like the closer you can get to 5.2, the better extract you'll get. So really recommend to control your mash pH to around a 5.2.
Great.
Thank you, Twila. Thank you so much for joining. Next month, I'm not sure whether we're gonna have a meeting or not next month. I don't have a guest yet, so we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, thank you so much for joining and presenting, and this was fantastic. And send us all your beer once you get your system up. That'd be great. We'll taste it for you. Make sure it's okay.
Well, I wish I could invite you all here to the Malt House. If it weren't for COVID, it would be. We do give tours. Maybe eventually in the future we can extend that invite to you all.
Perfect. All right. Any last questions? Going once. Going twice. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Take care.
Take care.